The notification lit up millions of phones at exactly 11:43 p.m. Eastern Time. Breaking. Hip-hop mogul Jay-Z launches scathing attack on White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt after her legal analysis of Sean Diddy Combs case. Her response has left the music industry reeling and social media in complete chaos. What started as a late-night Twitter rant from one of hip-hop's most powerful figures quickly spiraled into a cultural earthquake that would expose hidden connections, challenge the untouchable status of music industry royalty, and prove once again that underestimating Karoline Leavitt was a catastrophic mistake. By dawn, the entertainment world would be forever changed, and Jay-Z would learn that some battles are better left unfought. It had been 3 days since Karoline Leavitt's devastating analysis of prosecutorial misconduct in the Sean Combs case had sent shockwaves through the legal world. Federal investigations were underway, prosecutors were resigning, and the entire case against Diddy was crumbling. But in the insular world of hip-hop royalty, the implications went far deeper than constitutional law. They threatened to unravel decades of carefully constructed power structures. Sean Carter, known to the world as Jay-Z, sat in his $88 million Bel Air mansion at 11:30 p.m., scrolling through news coverage of the Combs case collapse. At 54, he had built an empire that extended far beyond music. From Roc Nation to his various business ventures, he was worth over $2 billion and wielded influence that reached into politics, sports, and entertainment. He was used to controlling narratives, managing crises, and protecting his interests through a combination of wealth, connections, and strategic silence. But this felt different. This felt personal. Jay-Z had known Sean Combs for over 2 decades. They had been rivals, collaborators, and reluctant allies in building hip-hop into a global phenomenon. More importantly, they shared business interests, mutual associates, and a web of connections that stretched across the entertainment industry. The prosecution of Diddy hadn't just been a legal matter. It had been a threat to the entire ecosystem of hip-hop power. Now, watching news anchors praise the brilliant legal analysis of a 26-year-old White House press secretary, Jay-Z felt something he rarely experienced: loss of control. The carefully orchestrated narrative that had protected the hip-hop elite was being dismantled by someone who didn't understand the rules of the game. His wife Beyoncé had gone to bed hours earlier, but Jay-Z remained in his home studio, surrounded by platinum plaques and Grammy Awards, stewing in frustration. He opened Twitter, now X, and began typing. The first tweet was measured, almost diplomatic. Interesting to see political figures inserting themselves into legal matters they don't fully understand. Some cases are more complex than they appear from the outside, but as the replies poured in, some supportive, others critical, Jay-Z's carefully controlled public persona began to crack. He was used to universal praise, to having his opinions treated as gospel in the hip-hop community. The idea that people were actually defending Karoline Leavitt's analysis was infuriating. At 11:43 p.m., he crossed the line. This little girl at Karoline Leavitt thinks she can take down legends with her law school theories. Where was she when we were building this culture from nothing? Easy to criticize from behind a government podium when you've never risked anything real. Some people understand loyalty. Others are just political opportunists looking for headlines. The tweet was accompanied by a photo of Karoline at the White House podium with the caption, "When keeping it real goes wrong. Stay in your lane, rookie." Within minutes, Jay-Z's attack was amplified across the hip-hop universe. Industry figures who owed their careers, their deals, or their continued relevance to his influence began piling on. The response was swift, coordinated, and ruthless. Drake, from his Toronto mansion, tweeted, "Facts. Some people don't understand the culture they're trying to tear down. Respect the legends who built this." Lil Wayne added, "She don't know what she talking about." Jay speaking truth. "Stop trying to destroy black excellence with politics." The hashtag stay in your lane began trending, filled with attacks on Karoline's appearance, her background, her qualifications. Memes flooded social media showing her face photoshopped onto various rookie scenarios. Hip-hop blogs and influencers joined the pile-on, framing her legal analysis as an attack on black culture and hip-hop heritage. But the assault went beyond social media. Industry sources began leaking to entertainment publications, questioning Karoline's motives and suggesting political conspiracies. TMZ ran a segment titled, Press secretary versus hip-hop royalty. Who's really out of line? Complex magazine published an op-ed arguing that Karoline's analysis was, quote, cultural imperialism disguised as legal expertise. DJ Academics, one of hip-hop's most influential online personalities, went live on Instagram with a scathing 20-minute rant. This chick really thought she could come for Diddy and nobody would check her? Jay-Z is protecting the culture, protecting black entrepreneurship. Where was she when these men were building empires from the ground up? The narrative was taking hold. Karoline Leavitt, the privileged white press secretary, was attacking successful black entrepreneurs and trying to destroy hip-hop culture through legal technicalities. It was a powerful frame, one that played into existing tensions about race, power, and justice in America. But there was one problem with this coordinated attack. They had fundamentally misunderstood who they were dealing with. Inside the White House residence, Karoline sat at her kitchen table at 1:30 a.m., her laptop open, a cup of coffee growing cold beside her. She had been following the attacks on social media with a mixture of hurt and growing anger. The personal nature of the assault, the coordinated quality of the response, and the attempt to frame her constitutional analysis as cultural attack had pushed her past her breaking point. But Karoline Leavitt didn't respond to attacks emotionally. She responded with research. For the next 6 hours, she dove into public records, business filings, court documents, and financial disclosures. She traced corporate connections, partnership agreements, and business relationships spanning 2 decades. What she found was a web of associations that painted a very different picture of the hip-hop industry's response to her Diddy analysis. Jay-Z's Roc Nation had significant business relationships with several companies that had contracts with Combs Enterprises. His streaming platform Tidal had exclusive distribution deals for artists managed by Combs Bad Boy Records. Most significantly, both Jay-Z and Diddy were investors in the same private equity fund that had purchased stakes in several music distribution companies. But the connections went deeper. Court filings from various civil lawsuits revealed that Jay-Z's companies had used the same law firm that had represented Diddy in multiple cases. Text messages released in unrelated litigation showed coordination between their respective crisis management teams. Financial records indicated that they had jointly invested in real estate ventures and technology startups. What emerged was a picture not of cultural solidarity, but of financial interdependence. Jay-Z's attack on Karoline wasn't about protecting black culture or hip-hop heritage. It was about protecting a business empire that could be threatened by the precedent her analysis had set. At 7 a.m., as the sun rose over Washington, D.C., Karoline made a decision that would change everything. She wasn't going to respond as a press secretary defending her professional qualifications. She was going to respond as a legal analyst exposing the truth. Karoline's response began at exactly 8:47 a.m. with a tweet that immediately shifted the entire conversation. Mr. Carter, at Jay-Z, since you've chosen to make this personal, let's talk about what's really motivating your attack on my constitutional analysis of the Combs case. What followed was a 23-tweet thread that systematically dismantled not just Jay-Z's criticism, but the entire narrative he and his allies had tried to construct. Each tweet was backed by public documents, court filings, and business records that Karoline had spent the night compiling. You frame this as protecting the culture, but let's examine your actual financial interests in defending Mr. Combs. According to SEC filings, Roc Nation has $47 million in contractual obligations tied to Bad Boy Records distribution deals. Your streaming platform Tidal has exclusive rights to 127 songs from artists managed by Combs Entertainment, generating approximately $2.3 million annually in licensing fees. That's not cultural solidarity, that's a business relationship. You and Mr. Combs are co-investors in Meridian Capital Partners, which owns stakes in 3 music distribution companies that could face scrutiny if the pattern of legal violations I identified extends to business practices. Tweet after tweet, Karoline laid out the financial connections with surgical precision. She cited specific contract numbers, filing dates, and dollar amounts. She showed how the hip-hop industry's response to her analysis wasn't organic cultural defense, but a coordinated effort to protect interconnected business interests. You talk about building this culture from nothing, but your companies have used the same crisis management firm that handled Mr. Combs' media strategy during previous legal challenges. Cornerstone Strategic Communications minus $340,000 in fees last quarter alone. The law firm representing Mr. Combs in his federal case, Morrison, Hecht & Amp Associates, also represents Roc Nation in litigation matters. Partners in the same legal defense strategy, not cultural defenders. But Karoline saved her most devastating revelation for the end of the thread. Here's what's really interesting, Mr. Carter. According to testimony in the 2019 civil case Williams versus Bad Boy Records, you personally intervened to help suppress evidence of workplace misconduct. The same type of evidence manipulation I identified in Mr. Combs' federal case. You're not defending hip-hop culture. You're defending a system of power and influence that prioritizes profit over justice, wealth over accountability. That's not culture, Mr. Carter. That's corruption. The thread concluded with a statement that will be quoted for years to come. I grew up listening to your music, respecting your business acumen, admiring your rise from Brooklyn to global influence. But wealth and success don't place anyone above constitutional law. If protecting, quote, the culture means protecting illegal evidence collection and prosecutorial misconduct, then maybe it's time for the culture to change. The response to Karoline's thread was immediate and seismic. Within hours, the hip-hop industry's coordinated attack had completely collapsed. Artists who had joined the pile-on began deleting tweets. Industry figures started distancing themselves from Jay-Z's initial criticism. Entertainment lawyers warned their clients about potential legal exposure from their public statements. The most damaging blow came when several hip-hop journalists began investigating Karoline's claims independently. Complex Magazine's Soumya Krishnamurthy published a follow-up piece titled The Business Behind the Beef: How Financial Interests Shaped Hip-Hop's Response to Leavitt. The article confirmed many of Karoline's documented connections and revealed additional business relationships she hadn't even mentioned. Rolling Stone's hip-hop editor published an editorial apologizing for the magazine's initial coverage. We allowed ourselves to be caught up in a narrative about cultural protection when we should have been examining the business interests behind that narrative. Ms. Leavitt's analysis deserves serious consideration, not industry backlash. But perhaps the most significant shift came from within the hip-hop community itself. Younger artists, particularly those without financial ties to the industry's power structure, began speaking out in support of Karoline's constitutional analysis. Chance the Rapper tweeted, "Protecting the culture means protecting justice, not protecting powerful people from accountability. Respect to @Karoline Leavitt for standing up for what's right." No Name, the Chicago rapper known for her social activism, was even more direct. Y'all really tried to use black culture as a shield for business interests? That's not protecting culture. That's exploiting it. The generational divide became clear as older, more established artists remained silent, while younger voices increasingly supported the constitutional principles Karoline had articulated. By the end of the week, Jay-Z's attack on Karoline had become a case study in how not to handle crisis communication. Business publications analyzed his response as a textbook example of overreach, while legal experts praised Karoline's forensic dissection of industry power structures. The damage to Jay-Z's carefully cultivated image was substantial. Stock prices for his publicly traded companies dropped 7% in 3 days. Roc Nation faced questions from investors about potential legal exposure. Tidal subscribers began canceling accounts in protest of what they saw as an attempt to undermine justice. Most significantly, Jay-Z's attack had accomplished the opposite of its intended effect. Instead of silencing Karoline or discrediting her analysis, it had drawn attention to the business relationships and financial incentives that motivated the hip-hop industry's response to the Combs case. Federal investigators began examining whether industry coordination to suppress negative coverage constituted obstruction of justice. 5 days after his initial attack, Jay-Z published a carefully worded statement that fell far short of an apology, but acknowledged the controversy. Upon reflection, my comments about Ms. Leavitt were more personal than they should have been. While I continue to believe in supporting my colleagues and protecting the achievements of hip-hop culture, I recognize that legal analysis and business relationships are separate issues that deserve separate consideration. For Karoline, the week had been a masterclass in the intersection of law, politics, business, and culture. She had not only defended her constitutional analysis, but had exposed how power and influence operate in America's entertainment industry. In her next press briefing, when asked about the hip-hop industry's response to her work, Karoline was characteristically direct. I have enormous respect for hip-hop as an art form and cultural movement, but respect for culture doesn't mean tolerance for corruption. When powerful people use their platforms to attack constitutional analysis, it raises questions about what they're really trying to protect. She paused, looking directly at the cameras. The Constitution applies to everyone, equally. Billionaire rappers, federal prosecutors, and press secretaries alike. That's not an attack on any culture. That's the foundation of American justice. The Jay-Z incident became a turning point in how celebrity criticism of government officials was perceived and handled. It demonstrated that wealth and cultural influence couldn't substitute for legal argument, and that attempted intimidation through social media could backfire spectacularly when directed at someone with the skills and courage to respond effectively. Months later, when asked in a Harvard Law Review interview about the hip-hop industry's response to her work, Karoline reflected on the broader implications. What happened with Mr. Carter illustrated something important about power in America. When you challenge corruption or demand accountability, the first response is often to attack the messenger rather than address the message. But in a democracy, the message matters more than the messenger, and the Constitution matters more than any individual's business interests. The incident also marked a generational shift in hip-hop culture itself. Younger artists increasingly embraced social justice advocacy that included supporting constitutional protections and legal accountability. The old model of unquestioning loyalty to industry power structures gave way to a more nuanced understanding of how justice and culture could coexist. Jay-Z's midnight attack had lasted only hours, but its consequences would reshape conversations about power, accountability, and justice for years to come. In trying to silence a constitutional analysis with wealth and influence, he had instead amplified its importance and exposed the very system of corruption it had identified. The lesson was clear. In America, the Constitution still matters more than celebrity status, legal principles still trump business interests, and sometimes the most powerful response to an attack is simply the truth, delivered with precision and backed by facts. Karoline Leavitt had proven once again that underestimating her was not just a mistake, it was a guarantee of spectacular failure.